Business News. Marcus Carlson joins me for that. Marcus, it's our top news story, the situation in Ukraine, and there are warnings that the country is heading for financial collapse.
Indeed, Ukraine is mourning its dead after last week's event that eventually led to the departure of President Yanukovych. At the same time, a global banking group has warned that the clock is ticking for the international community to provide Ukraine with aid. The International Institute of Finance says Ukrainian state coffers are essentially empty and that Ukraine will need help within weeks. The IIF represents around 450 major banks around the world. It says Ukraine's foreign exchange reserves also fell from $16 billion to $12 billion just during January. Now, Russia pledged to help Ukraine with a $15 billion lifeline towards the end of last year, but the next $2 billion installment has been put on hold by Moscow as Russia says it needs to know who it's dealing with in Kiev. French Foreign Minister FABIUS is calling on Russia to pay out.
What we know is that Ukraine's financial situation is very bad. That's for certain. In terms of aid for Ukraine, that is yet to be determined. There is what Russia has promised, and it is to be hoped that our Russian friends and partners can carry on with their support.
Next up, Britain's oil industry will take a hit if Scotland votes to become independent at a referendum later this year. That warning came from British Prime Minister David Cameron earlier. He was leading a rare cabinet meeting in Aberdeen, which is known as Scotland's oil powerhouse. Only a short distance away, though, the Scottish First Minister fired back. Delano de Souza has more.
Continuing his campaign against Scottish independence. Visiting a rig on the North Sea, Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron announced investment plans of $320 billion over the next 20 years. An investment which is likely to see production increase by 4 billion barrels.
Because we're a top 10 economy, we can afford the tax allowances, the investment, the long-term structure that's necessary to make sure we recover as much from the North Sea as possible.
The North Sea is becoming a major battleground ahead of September's referendum. In the last 3 years, production has fallen 40%. The proposed investment will improve the efficiency of natural gas production, an investment the British Prime Minister says is possible because of Britain's size, but the Scottish Government doesn't agree.
That's a very interesting concept for people in this part of the world who can glance across the North Sea to Norway, a country smaller than Scotland, but a country which, by every observation, has handled its North Sea oil and gas resources substantially better than the stewardship from Westminster.
Recently, oil giant BP's chief executive indicated his business would face uncertainty if Scots vote for independence. Both sides of the referendum are working hard to ensure North Sea oil revenues remain with them.
On to other things now. The Mobile World Congress has started in Barcelona in Spain. It's one of the biggest events in the diary of the global mobile industry. And Samsung's latest flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S5, was unveiled at the show earlier, just a short while ago on Monday night. The screen of the S5 is slightly larger than that of its predecessor, and it also has a sharper camera. Samsung is hoping for a hit with consumers as smartphone margins are under pressure. More people are buying smartphones than earlier, but they are also seen to be spending less for each of those smartphones. Also in Barcelona, we saw Nokia unveiling its first smartphones that run on Google's Android operating system. The three phones are intended to target emerging markets in particular. The cheapest version is going on sale for €89. It's seen as a play by Nokia to tap into a part of the markets that's dominated by Google. Now let's take a look at the stock markets next. In the United States, the indices finished the week's first session higher. A number of deals helped shares over on Wall Street. That included the news that billionaire investor Carl Icahn has increased his stake in eBay. Earlier in Europe, we also saw the indices close to the upside as the indices took their cue really from the United States. Here in Paris, it's worth noting that shares in Numéricable gained almost 7%. The FTSE in London London was boosted by Vodafone shares, meanwhile, as this speculation that the mobile network operator could become a takeover target. And if we stay with shares in the UK, shares in British bank HSBC came under pressure on Monday. It came as Europe's biggest bank by market value reported worse than expected profits. HSBC's full-year earnings for 2013 came in at $22.6 billion. That's better than for 2012 on the back of cost-cutting and job cuts, but it wasn't enough to satisfy investors. Meanwhile, shares in Swedish lorry maker Scania popped almost 32% on Monday. It follows a €6.7 billion bid from Volkswagen to buy the Scania shares it doesn't already own. That was a significant premium on Scania's market value after Friday's market close. Some are questioning this bid, though, and some analysts say that Volkswagen is ready to pay too high a price for Scania. And with that, I'm going to wrap up the business news, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Catherine.
Thanks very much indeed, Marcus Carlson, our business editor there with the very latest